Thank you, Wes. Thank you for having me. But today I just thought I submitted 2 talks, and I thought, what's something I can ramble about for like however long without too much preparation, and this was the one that got in, luckily. So here we are. Obligatory sponsor slide, without which DDD couldn't happen. I've been attending for years, and I love coming to this event. So yes, thank you to all our sponsors this year. I wanted to start by saying what this talk is not about. I know that's a weird way to start a talk, but a lot of us here in the room work for very different companies and make very different stuff. A lot of us are probably making not games, because this is not a game dev conference, and usually not games or tools, they're used for a very specific purpose. You want the user experience to be really smooth, quick, frictionless, all of those nice things. You want people to give you their money as quickly as possible. Games are like the opposite of that. So as much as I'm going to talk about the design of games today, some of what I'm saying today is not applicable to what you do at work, and I would not argue that we should make everything into a game, because it's not appropriate. Gamification and all of that is a whole other talk. Happy to talk about that later. But games are really unique, and the way we design for them is unique because we want them to be challenging. We want there to be good friction, and people are coming to them with very different motivations than they are coming to your tool. They're coming to play for fun. If they're not having fun, they're just going to leave. They don't care. And often it's very social, or there's a social element, even if it's a single-player game. So that's important to keep in mind as we go through and I talk about and nerd out about puzzle game design and why it's good. People are coming to it with a very different mindset than they are coming to use your tool. And turning your tool into a game is not the answer to making more people use your game, or tool, sorry. Another way to think about this is, my little animation. Not games are like you're taking the staircase and you kind of want it to be as easy as possible, even though you know it's going to be a little bit painful. And games is like, I'm going on a hike and I'm doing it for the experience itself. The experience itself is the reward. As you can see, I do not need AI to make art for me. I make terrible art all on my own. But the first game I wanted to talk about, which was one of my favorite puzzle games, and I love the design choices used in this game, is called The Witness. Quite a few years old now, so you could probably pick it up for pretty cheap. And it's on iPad now too. The Witness, you're on an abandoned island, and there's a bunch of puzzles all around the island. You just go around solving puzzles. It's basically the whole game. And towards the end of the game, some of the most difficult puzzles look like this. If you've never played this game, you're looking at this going, what the hell is happening? I have no idea what's going on. That is the right reaction. If you have played this game, you might be having traumatic flashbacks. That's probably also the right reaction. But I wanted to show you what it looks like at the end in terms of how complex the puzzles can get and where it begins. They do not expect the player to be able to solve these puzzles at the start of the game. It builds you up to this level of complexity. So the very first puzzle actually looks like this. You're like, oh, that's easy. I can solve that in 2 seconds. Yes, that is the point. But it also, the first few puzzles, although they seem ridiculously simple, they have a very important design job. It's just to communicate some really key things about how puzzles work in this game and how to succeed in doing these puzzles. I'm hoping my videos will work. Even if there's no sound, it doesn't matter. But this first puzzle is like, here's how you interact with a puzzle panel. Like, you use this control, you do this, and you draw a line. The second puzzle is like, hey, the lines can change. The start, hopefully you've noticed, the start starts at the big blob, and this next puzzle is going to show you that the end ends at the little rounded blob, not the sharp-ended blobs. And the line cannot cross over itself. So if you try to do that maze and cross the line over itself, it won't work. And this puzzle is like, hey, the blobs can move. The start blob and the end blob can move. They're meant to be solved very quickly, but it's teaching you some really important basic ideas you need for the rest of the game. The other thing this game does well as only introducing or upping the difficulty a tiny bit at a time, is that it'll lock away the harder areas until you've demonstrated the skills required to do the puzzles in those areas. So this is like the tutorial area. Once you've completed the tutorial area, you can explore wider. As to another example of some of the puzzle mechanics in the game, they're a bit unique to the game. When you first see the black and white squares, you have no idea what they mean. That's on purpose. So the first puzzle, you can brute force, and you are meant to brute force and guess. There's only 3 possible ways you can fill that in. Eventually, you'll get the right one. The next one in the sequence is also brute force, but you'll notice the start and the end points change. And the puzzles start giving you feedback about whether you got it right or wrong. Whereas with the maze, it was like, yeah, I did the maze. So you can see it's the same, but the start and end has changed. And so hopefully what it's trying to get you to do is come up with a hypothesis about what the rule behind the black and the white squares is, and then test that hypothesis as the puzzles get more and more complex. If your hypothesis is correct, you'll eventually find these easy to solve. But you can see that they are getting bigger and more complex at the same time. So you can't brute force, or it becomes much harder to just keep guessing. So you really do have to figure out what's going on. Does anyone think they know what the rule for the black and white squares is?
Yes.
Yeah?
You have to go over the top, like step out of the white square.
So the rule is you have to separate the black and the white squares with your line to successfully solve the puzzle. And so this sequence is like the teaching sequence that teaches you this mechanic, but it's designed in a very specific way to help teach you and develop that understanding in you. This game uses no written words whatsoever. There is no telling the player. It is you learn through experience, which is another reason why I love the design behind this game, because it communicates very different, very complex puzzle mechanics. It's just one of about 7 unique mechanics that you can find around the island. And then towards the end, it starts combining the mechanics together. And so you're like, oh, what was that black and white squares again? I haven't seen that for a while. But you can see the first 2, or first 3 even, you can guess. And eventually, it just gets more and more complex, so you cannot guess. And starts really making sure you understand the rule behind what's going on, but it's only increasing in difficulty a little bit at a time. So it's within what you're able to do. We're not just throwing you in the deep end. So one of the key things I think to me that came out of this game, and what really good puzzle games do, is only presenting puzzles to the player that they have the tools to solve. Whether that's brute forcing the first one and only having 3 possible answers, or hey, you've solved these, now let's do some more difficult black and white ones. But we're not going to show you those difficult ones until you've done this sequence here. That's really, really important to good game design, because if you're throwing the player into a situation where they do not have these tools, they'll get frustrated in a bad way and they will quit. They have no motivation to continue playing your game. If it's just one step up of what they've done before, that's this sweet spot around, oh, I know I can do this, I've just got to keep trying. This other one, which I've got in my bag actually, was described to me as like The Witness, but in book form. And it's made by this amazing indie developer from Slovakia who makes puzzle books. And I was gobsmacked, because I'm like, how are you going to give me feedback on paper about whether I got it right or not? And he's designed these, and he user tests them a lot, play tests them a lot, very, very cleverly. So each page in the book is a different puzzle. Again, they start easy and build their way up. And he gives some explicit instructions at the start about what winning the puzzle or solving the puzzle correctly looks like. So you know, yes or no, have I solved this puzzle? Without looking at the answers in the back. So as an example, the first keyword is lock. The game's called Lock as well. If you colour in the letters lock, you're then allowed to colour in one square somewhere else in the puzzle. So I've solved that puzzle successfully because I've coloured in all the squares. It gets much more complicated than that, but I'll leave it at that for now. They've also recently released a digital version, which I highly recommend as well. I think it has the same charm as the physical version. But in the physical book, it comes with this little sheet of plastic, and so you use a whiteboard marker, and you do it over the top of the page with the whiteboard marker, because I make mistakes all the time, and it takes me a few goes, right? So again, he sets it up very simply, but he only increases the difficulty a little bit at a time, and he only introduces there's maybe like 5 keywords you can learn that have different effects. He only introduces new keywords very sparingly, so it's not all at once at the start. The other thing the book does really well is at the back, there's like 2 versions of the solutions. The first part is like, hey, here's some hints about what the rules around the keywords are, and then the back of the solutions is the actual answer. So if you just want a hint, you can get a hint without spoiling the puzzle for yourself, just to get you over the line. So from this game, I think the player needs to know what they're aiming for to know what's going on. If they don't know what to do, that's putting friction in the wrong place. You want the friction to be in the puzzle, not I don't know what to do here. The other thing is hints can be helpful and it's not cheating. If your game doesn't have hints, that's okay, that's a choice. People are just going to Google it. So think about like how would you give a hint to a player without spoiling the answer? That can be a helpful thing to have available. A lot of games choose not to do this, like The Witness does not have hints. But if you go to the Reddit community, people are really good at giving hints without spoiling the puzzle mechanics, and it's like a beautiful thing to see. Another game I wanted to talk about, which people might not consider a puzzle game, but I absolutely do, is Untitled Goose game, made by a small indie team from Melbourne called House. And it was released, I think, in 2019, and it's sort of like the internet went crazy with goose memes. In this game, if you haven't played, you're a goose and you're causing mischief in the village, basically. And the puzzles are presented to you as a series of tasks on your to-do list. If you can't read what my kids call the fancy writing, you can, in the settings menu, change the font to be more legible. But you just get this to-do list, and it looks quite straightforward. Some tasks are easier than others. And as you go through the area, you can do whatever you want to complete those tasks. This puzzle game is really interesting because there are multiple solutions to a puzzle. The previous 2 I just showed had 1 solution per puzzle. So in this game, like I've used this in research quite a bit, and different people will solve these puzzles in vastly different ways, which is really fun to watch, and it's really interesting to watch. And the other thing is like it encourages creativity, and then once you've done the task, it gives you feedback by crossing it off your to-do list. But the different characters in the world will have these little animation sort of behavior loops that they do, and they'll respond to your actions in the game as well. So this task is one of the hardest ones in the starting area, is just get him to wear the sun hat, because it's not obvious. You've got to like get him to bend over to replant the flower. But like I've had players, like one of the tasks is get the rake in the lake, and another one is get the gardener wet. Most players turn the sprinkler on to get the gardener wet. I had some people playing, they did this one first. The gardener chased them into the lake, and they accidentally also completed get the gardener wet. So it's when there's a bit more openness to what the solutions can be, there's a lot more stuff that can happen, so it's worth doing a lot more playtesting. And the question as a designer is like, are you happy with that, or do you want to force them to do it in a particular way? Is there a reason you want to force them to do it that way? And thinking about that pro and con of having multiple solutions available. As you progress through the game, there's different areas, and the tasks get more and more complicated and harder because the people get more wise to your wily tricks. And they also released a co-op mode, so you can play 2 of you, causing mayhem at the same time, which also I imagine would have required a lot of playtesting to make sure that didn't break the game. But another thing that all of these puzzle games have is really no penalty for failure. You can't die, there's no hit points, there's no resetting. So it does absolutely encourage people to explore and try things out, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, and I can go on to the next thing. So good puzzle games will often be designed in a way like this, because they want the challenge to be the puzzle, not like running back to where you were when you failed the puzzle. And a lot of them aren't reaction time based, they're more like logic and trying things out based. And I think the last game I wanted to mention is Unpacking, again, made by a developer or team from Brisbane. Was released a few years ago and won a bunch of awards. Essentially, you unpack these boxes and put the items in your room, and you follow this character through their life through a series of houses that or moves they make throughout their life, right? And it tells the story through what you're unpacking and like what house you're in and all of these other interesting things. So it's a really simple mechanic, and you can put most of the items wherever you like. When you finish unpacking all of the boxes, sometimes some of the items might be in the wrong place and you have to move them, but that's about the extent of the puzzle solving. For example, not this level, but in another level, there's like a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom. So if you put toothpaste in the bedroom, you're forced to move it to the bathroom before it'll let you finish the level. But difficulty-wise, the puzzles are very, very simple, but they use this mechanic to tell a story, which I think is a different kind of aha, I guess, to the puzzle solving we were talking about before. But so when you try and finish the level, it'll highlight things. Sorry, it's red. You can't really see that it's red on there, but it'll sort of outline the object in red to show which ones you need to move before you can successfully finish the level. And through this really simple mechanic, it tells a very, very interesting story that I will not ruin. And the game's not terribly long if you ever feel inclined to play it. But there's a moment in one of the levels where there's an item and you can't find where it goes, and you're like, oh, that's really good storytelling. And anyway, highly recommend. I don't want to ruin it for you. But feedback on, as you've seen in all other games, feedback on whether you got it right or not is really key to the learning and the aha moment for all puzzle games. And if you're not giving feedback to the player and they don't know whether they were right or wrong, they can't learn. So you need to have some sort of feedback to give to your player or user that, yep, you did it right. Or, no, you did it wrong, here's why. If they don't know why, then that can be very frustrating as well. So these are all of the things, if you wanted to take a photo. But I could talk about games all day. This website, which I have nothing to do with, by the way, is an amazing this is just people who are passionate about puzzle games. And so you can go on there and find recommendations for puzzle games that scratch the right itch for your brain and the types of things that you like doing, which is different for everyone. And this one here, which is on the front page, I took a screenshot yesterday, is actually by a Perth developer who's been working on this game for 7 years. So yeah, I'll hang around if you have any questions directly after, but I think we're out of time and everyone's probably hungry for lunch. So thank you for coming to listen.